almost forgot about y'all out there. So we got our post lined up. I was a little short on my installation on that post, so we're not fully level, but we are pretty dang close. And as you can see here, we got our bolts that attach to the bracket, so we can adjust horizontally and vertically how we need to go. So got us clamped in here. Got ourselves pretty level. And now you can see on the rear of the bracket, we have our mounting holes. I still need to cut this board down to fit, and then go from there on down the post and get my proper measurements for where I'm going to have the metal panels. Quick change, make sure it's locked and tight. Safety off, and back to it. Oh, that's much better. Alright. So we are now onto the second board. As you can see from that post to this one, it is not 8-foot center, but I did that on purpose because of what happened down there when I did not take my take-up into consideration. So what we got to do, of course, is find the middle point of this bracket, which you can see here, the bracket is 6 inches long. So find our 3-inch mark. Oops, I'll flip that around. The 3-inch mark right in the middle of that post. Make my cut line. Since we're not attached, just hooked up with some C-clamps, and those one-handed easy adjust ones are really nice to have. And I usually use a level for this, but I can use the end of my ruler, kind of dig a 90 my cut line. Then off to the saw and do our cutting. Just while I got you here, I'll walk on over. One thing that helps me as well for interesting cuts is, as you can see here, we got our guide that will be on the side of our up against whatever we're cutting, or our little can't think of the word right now, but measuring out like this, usually with a measuring tape. So we know from this point where the teeth are to the edge of my guide is about 1 inch and 2/16 of an inch. So now I know when I have my piece of material. I'll grab this scrap for example, real quick for you. So we have our board, and we want to cut off this real nice and perfect like. So this would be my guide, which would span the whole length that I clamped to this material. We would just then measure out, say sorry, that's my cut line right here. So I'd measure 1 2/16 right here, clamp down my material lightly here, flip to the other side, measure my 1 2/16 from that mark on this side and this side, make it nice and perpendicular, so that way when we got our saw lined up here, our line is going to be nice and lined up with our cut line here, and make a nice clean cut all the way even. There is a mark right here showing where where the blade's going to be cutting, but I find that I am not the best at getting a very steady straight line, so having this little guide on the side helps for much better clean cuts, especially when cutting plywood and long cuts. Alrighty, so there is a conundrum that I've been fighting with for a minute now, because you can see here, take-up is everything. So I did not factor in the take-up from top to bottom here, which had a very nice overlap. But then later, trying to get the material to line up flush, I realized that this point up here to my next panel was off and was going to be overhanging down low. So to fix that, I kind of drove screws at an angle to attach here. These will also be added in support once I get the next panels up and in there. You can see down the back way, I did a similar setup of adding vertical, well, I guess you might not be able to see, but adding the vertical supports going down. That adds the added strength to be attached vertically, and gives another anchor point for the bottom edge. So, racking my brain on a way to fix that for this next section so I don't have complete offsets, because as you can see, that's the top of the next one, then down one will be the top of the next one, and so on. So realizing that this is going to be my next top post, I can now vary my distances here. I might have to use a little extra material on the metal paneling to make all the voids filled, but at least it's going to make life much easier down the road, because I'll have the proper spacing from the top to the middle to where I want to attach the next panel, and then the next, and so on. So thankfully this stuff is going to be hidden, so it's not going to be an eyesore. I attached a cut piece scrap that I had previously that's been treated both ends. I think it's about 4.5 inches, since before it was going to be lined up here, which gave me that really nasty offset. So once this is anchored in, my next post is going to be nice and level. So as we continue down, the next sections will be level as well, and we're going to have the proper spacing that I desired, so I don't have to fight, readjust, recut, all that delightful stuff. So yeah, always take a step back when you're in the middle of the project. It might take a little longer, get some more planning, get some more notes down, and in my case I was able to find a pretty simple solution. Alrighty, so far down to 2 more sections to go, and then putting up the corrugated metal sheeting. Since I got down to this section, realized that the distance here was much shorter here than our 2 foot from center to center of the 2x4s. So I made this nifty little center support, which will also help resisting or keeping this from, I can't talk right now, from sagging down or bowing out. So later I plan on doing the vertical supports on this section as well. But now we have our nice even sections to go off of. We'll be doing something similar down at this section, either doing a post here down to secure and then another one running across here for the last panel to go to. And then once that's all said and done, we can start slapping on our corrugated panels and making it look all party. So hopefully that part will go quick, and I still need to remember to cut off some of these screw heads that are sticking out. Thankfully I have not caught myself on them of yet, so yeah, not too shabby, right? Be back in a bit. Alrighty, so we have the main frame done. Only frame would be left would be the end gate down there. Realized as I was going, for the spacing to be proper and to get a good purchase, did these cross members over here. Of course, these bottom ones down here are going to be hidden anyway from the retaining wall, my side, and everything else is going to be covered up from here with the metal corrugated. So I think we are just about ready to start slapping up some corrugated metal. Oh yeah. So I had a lot of overhang, so I clamped this 2x4 as parallel as possible, and I used my rip saw right here with the metal cutting blade. Used this as a guide and cut down. You want it as tight as possible. Day 3. Welcome back, Zeonians and YouTubians. We're on day 3 of the fence project. As you can see, got the panels up yesterday, the forming the day before, and now I am cutting to fit the corrugated metal. Just wrapped up this bottom section, and sorry I forgot to bust out the camera and start doing that. What I found that works really great, and if you can do it before, make all your measurements for the bottom first and cut them. What I did, I screwed them on into place, cut where I wanted, and then kind of formed as I went, because there's some uneven spots on the form boards. That's why there's that aggressive slope at the middle right there. But at least it blends in pretty nicely. But using this dry wet cement blade cuts through it really, really well. There's not aggressive teeth that get snagged on it like a wood cutting wheel. So got this 7-inch Concord. I don't remember how much it was. I had to get it earlier for the cement stuff, but yeah, the diamond tip blade cuts through it really nicely, clean cut, as you can see on this section down here. So after it was all up in place, started making some measurements and lines. I tried several methods using these tin snips, which were good for small sections, but because the metal wraps over on itself, it's really hard to get a nice clean cut with them. So little finishing touches are decent with them. I also tried using the cement cutting wheel blade on the circ saw or grinding tool. It worked pretty well, but it had a habit of dancing between the ridges. So I mean, if you're cutting down the center of the ridge, it'd be a bit easier, but honestly, going with the cement on the cement blade on the circular saw works really nice. And you can see here with the 2x6s, kind of did a clamshell clamping on both ends, held the material really nice and tight so that way it wouldn't wobble. Alright, I'm actually back pretty quick on this section because while I was lining up my boards I realized there's a simple way. You get your nice little level, middle of your board, put your board up between. Once that is perfectly level, you can make your lines on the opposite side in reference to the uprights right there, which I will do now and come back and show you. There we go. So now, the board is too long. Nice and level. So I got my two cut lines. And while I was standing there, I just realized because I did those bottom cuts, my board should be nice and perpendicular to the base, which I can double check here. So with my speed triangle, that's, yeah, just about perpendicular, so that means that possibly, I forgot which side I had up on here. I think like this, so my left side is tilted in one way slightly, unless I just did my line a little off. And let's see about this side. As I fumble around with my speed square, I think I call it speed square. Alright, similar with this side, there is a slight angle to it. So, like I was saying before, either that post is slightly in or out a little bit. I didn't get it perfectly plumb when I set it. Similar with the 4x4 post on the left, might be not 100% plumb. So the nice thing is, these are just barely off, so I don't think it mattered too much. What might be important in my case, as you saw, I just did those lines right against those posts. Currently, they are as flat as possible on my two vertical fence posts. So if I were to cut this and attach it there, there would be no wiggle room between my post and the gate, which could cause binding. And with expansion and contraction of weather, when it's dry, it'd be a little shorter. When it gets a little wetter out, it would expand a little bit, which then would pinch my posts. So thankfully, the metal post has a little give versus the fence, so I could get away with it. But in the sense of not wanting to have to deal with that and get it too bound up, what I'll do is once I find my tape measure, I'll choose which side I want to do so and stick with just that side. Would be, let's see, what would be a good gap? Possibly a 1/4 inch. So when I put all my boards in between and line them up and make my lines, from one side I'll probably go with the metal post side, is just cut off either a 1/4 inch extra, so that way it'll shorten up the frame size a little bit. You know, 1/4 inch might be too much. I think, I wish I had a freaking a ruler right now, it'd be easy to hold up. I might take off 2/18 or 2/16, otherwise known as 1/8. I mean, it'd be probably really hard for you to see. That would give me a decent amount of give from the posts for expansion and contraction, not leave a huge gap in between. A 1/4 would be a decent gap. If you're having overlapping panels on the whatever side is facing the road or whatever, you can always have your fence planks have one on the post overshot a little bit, and that would cover up your gap, so you wouldn't have to worry about that. I'm still debating on how I want to have this set up. So in the spirit of troubleshooting while talking with you, I think I'm going to go with the safe bet of taking a 1/4 inch off, giving me plenty of room for that expansion and contraction from the heat and cold, and that way I know it won't bind up and get caught up on there. And it won't be a whole lot, but it will be a little bit of weight reduction if I have, you know, top, middle, and bottom supports. Just cut off a little bit, kind of additive property, that much more weight off from the hinges and all that. So I think I'll go with that, do the 1/4 inch and all of them on the this post side. And it should be. And one nice thing is when you eventually figure out the nice features of your tools. This has a little angle guide, so I was able to open that up, and might still be a little off. Damn it, there's another one. I'll be back. Alright, so I get the angle guide lined up where my cuts were actually at, and flip that around. So now you can see it's got just about the angle I need. I got to reset it because I accidentally slapped the locking screw in a little hard and offset it. But yeah, if you know your equipment, this will give me the proper angle, and just set it so I get my first cut just right, set it, get the second cut without all the measuring. And if you have multiple at the same angle, that helps out a lot. So I forgot about the added, or the shortened span between the two because of the gate brackets, the hinges. So these aren't exactly what I'll be using. I might be using these actually. I'm using 4 instead of 2 because of the weight requirements and how the edge is so close to the corner of my 2x4. So this might be swapped out. So before I was thinking of the expansion contraction distances, then I realized I don't have my hinges. So there's going to be about that much of a gap needed between my frame that I'm putting up and these hinges. So these will push out my frame a little more. So the way I remedied that for my next measurements is I got 2 of them, put them on the edge of this board here. That was just about the distance I needed. Since we're not trying to go exactly between the two, have a little gap for swing, that's a little wider than 2 of these. So I have my distance of the hinges back there, and now I also have the extra clearance because I got double the space of the hinge plus just a little bit. So about, remember how thick those ones were? But the thickness of that panel is now the gap I have, so my new measurements are going to have that added space. So now I can make my new cut with that added space, get this fitted in. I'll finally have my bottom piece cut to fit, and then can move on upward to the next ones. And I realized while I was doing this, this is the only one on the bottom that I'll need cut like this. If I were to do a slope on the top, I would have to do another one. But since my 2x4 is going across for the fence are horizontal, well, those should be horizontal as well. So I don't have to do any fancy cutting, just the distances between for my boards. Need to have those. And since it does have a slight tilt either direction, either my 4x4 post or my steel post, they can have a slight slant, but since they got an extra gap, it's not going to be a big deal. So at least that'll be nice for the next cuts. So I think I need more coffee because I'm not thinking it 100% today. So I guess you get to join me as I muddle through this one today. Alrighty, so I decided to clamp it up there. So you can see how the angle of that 4x4 post leaning towards us offset the metal post from the rest of the assembly, which is not a bad thing since the gate's going to swing inward. Alrighty, welcome back to day 3, I think. I can't remember now. Of working on the fence project. I debated putting the camera up and videotaping the whole thing, but the sun's shining down right on us. It's getting quite warm, so I wanted to bust it out and get moving. And with the fact I did not want this camera to be sitting out in the sun, end up frying it and or losing all the footage. So here is our shit. If I don't step on stuff, and I having to do this by hand, is the gate. So in this method, I laid out the frame down like yonder, or like so, laid across my pieces because I wanted to keep the nice lines going the same direction. So instead of just using one big piece going down, decided to cut up it was 1 or 2, which worked great. Only had a little bit of leftover, and laid it out, made my measurements, and staggered them. Sadly, on the rear, I didn't have full support on a couple, but I can go back later once I have some 2x4s, make those cross members, add a little extra strength to it. But since, as you can see, I staggered my spacing of the screws, so the metal panels will actually act as a nice solid frame to keep everything from warping. And as you can see down at the bottom, because of the gates being angled at the base, I also got the angle cut quite flush. Looks a little mangled, but that was semi on purpose because it had a sharp overlap, and to avoid getting anybody caught on those or stuff like that. Careful with that. You can see that'll be the side that I would be seeing, and while shifting it, stand up nice and sturdy. The panels don't have much wobble to it to attach the sides, so that is a nice solid clean frame